So yesterday I presented a bit about the context of the problem that we have in the Philippines. I actually have a million slides, but I will have to revise this as I go. So let's get rid of this one. Yeah. Let me just go straight to the problem that we have. There. Okay. So please notice the chart, the one on the one with the X's. You see the X? Okay, so that is, so on the horizontal axis, I have here the years from 1995 all the way to 2012, okay? And then on the vertical axis, I have the head count ratio, and that axis actually represents the income poverty head count, okay? So notice there that it hardly moved from 1995 all the way to 2012. And at about this time, except for the year 1997 when we had the Asian financial crisis, apart from this, we were having decent growth, actually. And so, but the thing is, we know that if you're a student of development, and then, of course, you know that it takes no less than sustained economic growth in order to bring down poverty. And so this was a puzzle to us, that poverty was not responding to growth. In fact, between the period 2003 to 2006, and then there was even an increase. And so this was really the dilemma that we're having. And a lot of people were criticizing the strategies of the government, that it should not be about growth. And to be fair, it was not really just about growth, because there were a lot of social development strategies. Now, before this also, it so happened that the economic planning minister, he was appointed, by the way, in 2012. And before this, he was a researcher. And he was already involved in multidimensional poverty index computation. And so we used 3 different surveys, nationally representative surveys. The FIS, that's the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, that's the one in the blue diamond. And then the red squares, that's the Annual Poverty Indicator Survey. And then the triangle, that's the National Demographic and Health Survey. So if you just notice, let's say, the blue diamonds, see that if we go only by that poverty head count of the multidimensional poverty index, then you see that there was that robust reduction in poverty, that indeed poverty was actually responding to growth. And so we thought that this was, the one that would give us a richer insight into what's happening to poverty. And so we also looked at this one, that indeed, if you look at this, this is the average intensity of multidimensional poverty, and then the head count, and then the size of the bubble is really the number of poor people who are multidimensional poor. So there was a reduction in both the head count ratio, the intensity, and also that bubble, but not so much the size of the bubble. And then we also noted that the reduction was more in terms of the head count than in terms of the intensity, okay? Because that downward reduction was actually not as much as that sideways reduction of poverty. Now, we were also interested in finding out, because there's still no agreement as to the cutoff for poverty in the multidimensional poverty index. We have actually, I suppose you'll be given a copy of the slide. So I have here actually the dimensions of poverty. It broadly followed the framework of the Human Development Index. There's education, there's health, there's a standard of living. But what we did for the cutoff was to follow the research done by Sabina's group, that if it's 1/3, if the deprivation is at least 1/3, then they will be MPI poor, considered MPI poor. But how robust really is that 1/3 cutoff? And so what we did here was to look at different values for that cutoff, and then what would be the adjusted head count. And so if there is intersecting lines, then you would know that that cutoff is not robust, okay? And of course, we're interested in the these are different years of that FIES. So we see here that if the cutoff is at this point, greater than 50%, then you have these two intersecting lines, and you will have inconclusive result as to whether there was really a reduction in poverty at that time. However, if your cutoff is actually lesser than that, and so we had this cutoff of 33%, then we're okay. So it's clear that we can have a very conclusive result. Now, another thing that we did was to look at this one. Looking at the MPI numbers for the regions in the Philippines. So this was the profile in 2000. So you have here the average intensity on the vertical axis, and then on the horizontal is the head count ratio. And the closer they are to this corner here, then the better it is. And of course, the smaller the bubble, then the better it is. Then you have there the National Capital Region, which has obviously the one with the least intensity and the least head count and the smallest bubble. And the one that is farthermost here is the ARMM. So if you've been to the Philippines, you would know that this is the region where we had a very long-standing conflict, internal conflict. This is the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. So it has the biggest bubble, and it's the farthest here. Now, what happened between 2000 and 2012, then we've had two presidents, and we've also had, during this current administration, then there's been lots of investments in social development. And so we were hoping that that would also show in this MPI. And so this is what happened. So you now have a convergence of these regions towards this end, which is a good thing, okay? And a lot of those bubbles actually shrunk in sizes. So there was that movement towards, being a better profile. However, the condition in the ARMM actually worsened. Okay. Now, this was also around the time that we were actually undertaking peace negotiations with that group, with the Muslim Filipinos there. And so before that, there was a signing last year. It was in October of last year of the framework agreement, and the final agreement was signed just this year. But before that actual signing, there was really not much happening there, because there were a lot of social development programs, but by and large, this was the group that was, kind of left behind. And it actually showed in this particular profile. And so our conclusion is, yes, we think that the MPI is actually useful for policy and targeting. And it's a good thing to have, some kind of a dashboard, and you don't have just one information about income poverty. You can have that info on the head count, the intensity, and the size of that bubble. And we have shown that indeed, actually, poverty was responding to economic growth. You just have to look at it in a very multidimensional lens. And there's that enormous diversity of multiple deprivation across population groups, and that beyond growth, we actually need to do something else. Clearly, growth is not enough, and even though you have all the social development programs, there has to be that deliberate move to really target the ones that are, so that no one will be left behind. And so we have decided to revisit our anti-poverty programs, and of course, further advance this knowledge and research on multidimensional poverty. And this is actually the framework for our update of the Philippine Development Plan. And you can see there at the top that the goal, the indicators that we have set for this development plan is that there will be poverty reduction in multiple dimensions. And of course, the others would be the employment, quality, employment creation, rapid and sustained and economic growth. And that will be it. Thank you very much.